the Ford Falcon has reached the end of the road. It's been an incredible journey, spanning 56 years of continuous manufacture for one of the most famous names in Australian motoring. But it was a journey that got off to a perilous start in 1960 when the first Falcon, the XK, proved too fragile for Australian roads. After that setback, Ford Australia decided it had to engineer and develop Falcon for local conditions. The ongoing ramifications of that decision will resonate long after the Blue Oval's local factories closed their doors at Broadmeadows and Geelong. To explain why, we've gone back to the spot where the Falcon truly became Australian.
This might be the latest and greatest fast Falcon, but it's a little known fact that the original 1960 XK Falcon, the first to be built in Australia, was a disaster.
It's actually true, isn't it? It was designed as an American boulevardier and it wasn't really modified for tougher Australian conditions.
No, it wasn't. Ford plucked it from American showrooms, built it here, discovered that the chassis wasn't strong enough, the ball joints fell out of them, the clutches failed, the wipers failed, all sorts of disasters. Ford had a PR nightmare on its hands.
And a sales failure in the end. That was a real issue for them, so they had to do something about it. They had to fix the Falcon, and they decided to do it locally.
They did, and that's the other little known fact. Where we are is a place called Cape Catastrophe on the Eyre Peninsula, south of Port Lincoln, a long way from nowhere. Rough roads, typical Australian conditions. This was Ford Australia's first proving ground.
That's absolutely correct. The Yuyangs didn't come along till 1965, but we're in 1963, and they have to come up with solutions for their car, and they ended up spending £1 million and making 1,500 changes. Not only did they test and develop and fix that car here, what became the XM Falcon, they also launched it to the media here.
They did, and what a huge event that would have been, bringing a media from all over the country to prove that the 1,500 changes they'd applied actually worked. They jumped it over jumps, they ran it through mud holes, they did water crossings. It didn't break, it got rave reviews. Falcon sales picked up.
That's correct, and that's why our contention is that this is really the Aussie birthplace of Falcon, because those few engineers that worked on that program, from there came the Yuyangs, and then from then eventually a global place in the Ford development empire which produced generations of this car, Territory, Ranger, Everest and so on.
That's right, and that legacy continues today, and it'll continue well beyond after Ford stops building cars, when Holden stops building cars and when Toyota stops building cars, on imported Ford models using local development that began right here.
Our journey to Port Lincoln started in Melbourne, home of the final models to be built by Ford in Australia, the Falcon and Territory SUV. First stop for us was the Yuyangs Proving Ground, where both cars were developed and where global models are now the focus of attention.
You and I have been coming here for quite a long time, but the place has been around for more than 50 years actually, and it came about as a result of that first Falcon's failure to cope with Australian conditions. They certainly can test thoroughly any car they want to in here, can't they?
They can. It's as good a proving ground as you'll get anywhere else in the Ford world. Big speed bowl, water crossings, ride handling tracks, dirt tracks, you name it, it's all here. As we've just seen, Bruce, a Chinese market Taurus being developed on the high-speed bowl. It's an indication of how global Ford's operation is here these days.
That's absolutely right. I mean, we think of it in terms of testing generations of Falcons here and developing the Territory here, but nowadays, with those cars going away, this centre has become part of Ford's global development, and there are some global vehicles that are actually based here, aren't they, that have their development here?
Now, it seems like yesterday you and I came here for the AU Falcon launch, and it wasn't that long ago. All we had was Falcons being developed here. Now we've got everything from Chinese market escorts, hatchbacks and sedans to potentially American large flagship sedans.
Of course, Ford's time as a manufacturer in Australia extends back far further than the 1960s to 1925, when it set up its first factories in the Victorian industrial city of Geelong. Since then, many thousands of people have worked for the Blue Oval in Australia.
And I was one of them. Yes, it might have only been for a couple of years while I was in uni studying journalism for this glamorous career I've got now. But me, like my father, like my uncle, like my mates, like a lot of school leavers in Geelong, came to work here at Ford. We pressed ring gears, we made seats for Falcons, we welded fuel tanks for Capri. We were part of a family, part of a company, part of a manufacturing industry.
From Geelong, it's more than 1,300 kilometres to Port Lincoln, a drive long enough to remind us of the virtues of Aussie cars built for Aussie conditions, and that it's not just the end of the road for Falcon.
Okay, so we spent a lot of time talking about Falcon, but the Territory should not be forgotten. Territory remains the only SUV developed and manufactured in Australia. And over a 12-year history, which began in 2004, it's proved to be a major success. We've driven it a long way on this trip, along a bunch of different and very challenging roads, and it's just reminded us yet again how well developed, how well engineered, and how well designed it was for Australian conditions.
Arriving in Port Lincoln, it was time to get directions to the old test routes used by Ford and collect the Falcon XM. We will be reuniting with those roads. Cape Catastrophe is south of Port Lincoln and is now part of the Lincoln National Park. Its remoteness is a key reason Ford chose to come here, as well as the tough testing conditions. Local Ford specialist Hagen Zerk and his father Peter, who worked for the local Ford dealer when the XM was being tested and then put on sale, showed us where to go. Nowadays, plenty of roads that were rough dirt tracks are smooth bitumen, but on the road to Wanna, the tarmac soon ended and we found ourselves on the very same rough and jarring course that Ford engineers developed the XM in 1963. They would smash and bash by day and then work on modifications by night. The testing regime was brutal and extended far and wide from Cape Catastrophe across the Eyre Peninsula, with two-man crews completing 1,000-mile days, day after day and week after week. The key focus for the engineers was strengthening the front of the Falcon, which because of fragile ball joints literally collapsed after being pounded on Australian roads. A reinforced front end, including distinctive V-bracing in the engine bay, were important improvements for the XM. The result of their handiwork was shown off to 50 Australian journalists flown in for the launch in February 1964. In the quiet tuna town that Port Lincoln was in those days, the launch of the XM was a sensation. The local paper devoted pages of coverage to it, and there was a mayoral reception for media and a coterie of executives led by Ford Australia Managing Director Wallace W. Booth. The localisation of Falcon was the theme Ford hammered to the press and in turn reported across Australia. It was a patriotic message and one backed up by the advertising developed for the XM, which was dubbed the Golden Quality Falcon.
Introducing the 1964 Ford Falcon. Falcon was certified Golden Quality. Tougher, more durable than ever before, with a bold new look of leadership. New Falcon is the first car in its class to offer you a choice of 3 engines, self-adjusting brakes, new low-maintenance finishes, and best of all, New Falcon is more service-free than any car its price has ever been. 64 Falcon has the distinction of certified Golden Quality. Every Falcon component is of the highest workmanship and finish. Every part of the new Falcon is built to Golden Quality standards. Yet it is priced down to the lowest priced 6-cylinder car in Australia. Performance is proof that new Falcon is quality built by Ford.
Who would have dreamed then we would reach the point we have today?
We've literally come to the end of the road, and not only the road where the Falcon was tested in 1963, but the road for Falcon as a production model in Australia and the end of the road for manufacturing of cars in Australia. I'm genuinely sad at the prospect of no longer having the Aussie Falcon, no longer having the Aussie car industry.
Spot on, Bruiser. We came to give the Falcon a proper send-off, the send-off it deserves. You know, after 25 years of road tests and reviews and comparos, and that's only the half of that car's history, the finality of it is here and now, and you know, I reckon the average Australian won't realise that for many years to come. You know, these events don't happen every day.